This is it, the final entry to this series of videos where we talk about the strongest monsters in Dungeons & Dragons. First we started with monsters ranging from CR 30 to CR 39, a long collection of liches, mages empowered by deities, and great dragons. Then on the next video we covered a series of powerful dragons, finishing with 2 awesome CR 40 monsters. And then lastly, on our last episode, we talked about 2 more dragons, a CR 40 dragon and then the most powerful named monster in the Forgotten Realms, Daurgothoth, a CR 50 Draco Lich. All the monsters and powerful people that we covered so far have names. They exist within the world of the Forgotten Realms and appear in either the games, in the novels, or are explicitly mentioned in the lore. There are, however, monsters that are as powerful or even more powerful than those that are not specific to the Forgotten Realms but do appear in D&D in general. Monsters that are either from other worlds or monsters that have not been specifically mentioned in the lore but that we have character sheets for. I typically do not cover non-Forgotten Realms content, but it is very possible that these monsters do exist in the world. It's just that they haven't been covered yet by any source. What I'm trying to say here is that so far we have covered monsters that could appear in Baldur's Gate 3. The monsters that I'm about to mention now probably won't. That's basically the essence of it. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and end this series by working our way through the strongest monsters that have ever been mentioned in this tabletop game. Genius Lawsy, CR 30 Colossal Ooze. The term Genius Lawsy comes from classical Roman religion, and it is supposed to refer to the spirit of a place. The easiest way that I could explain it would be, for example, to say, what if the concept of Mother Earth was real, and the planet Earth was actually alive in the traditional sense? Well, then that creature, that Mother Earth, would be a Genius Lawsy. Quote, sometimes a section of landscape itself animates as a single entity. One can appear as a mountain, an isolated valley, a small lake, a deep cavern, a single field, a tiny moon, or an entire plain. End quote. Essentially, if a mountain gained sentience, you would call it a Genius Lawsy. The creature does not truly have an intelligence of its own. Instead, it can enslave a single creature that resides upon it and then use its intelligence and attributes. Like, for example, it can enslave a human that lives upon it and then speak through it. It is said that Genius Lawsy are spontaneously generated from areas that have remained undisturbed for long eras. Quote, in time, the personality of the place becomes not just a metaphor, but also a fact. End quote. The CR of the creature comes from its ability to shift and move things on the environment it possesses in order to attack. If the spirit is possessing a valley, for example, it can move the ground and the trees within it in order to attack. It can open up holes on the ground, or it can enslave monsters and creatures within it and then use them as warriors. Elder Titans, CR 30. Specimens of absolute perfection. They are the pinnacle of might, ability, mental acuity, and will. Their form is a mirror to glory. The Titans were the first creation of the gods, the result of unrestrained power given to something. They stand over 80 feet tall or higher and weigh over 400,000 pounds. Each Titan is roughly humanoid but completely unique in their look and design. They take characteristics of the environment that they reside in and are so incredibly cerebral and intelligent that they most often close themselves off to society in order to contemplate existence. Essentially, the gods wanted to create something as beautiful as them. The result of what if a god were to use everything they had in order to create the best thing ever? That's what a Titan essentially is. The lore says that when the Titans started making their own creations, which are the giants, the gods grew angry for only they were allowed to create. Then the gods started to create as well, and the Titans grew angry for their creations would have to compete with the creation of the gods. A massive war arose between the two, where thousands of Titans died and hundreds of gods perished. Eventually the gods won and the Titans were banished and scattered all across the multiverse. universe. Elder Titans are the oldest of all of the Titans, the first of the creations that still live immortal and lost in the cosmos. The strongest of all of the Elder Titans is named Cronus, but he is way higher CR, so we'll talk about him once we get there. Dream Larva, CR 31. Dream larvae are the misbegotten offspring of deities of fancy, longing, and dreams. The first time any entity sees a dream larva for the first time, the dream larva takes on the shape of the person's worst nightmare. This is not an illusion or a trick. The dream larva literally takes on the form of that which you fear the most. This sight kills all but the most strong-minded. If you survive, you will see the true form of the dream larva, a large humanoid-shaped thing composed of thousands of crawling larval worms. It has horns, a crudely fanged mouth, 4 arms ending in claws, and 4 arms tipped with pincers. What makes this monster so strong is that even the most powerful of heroes, or even ancient dragons, can just instantly die upon seeing the dream larva for the first time, and even those that do survive can get taken into a nightmare world by the dream larva that is equally as difficult to avoid. On top of all of that, the dream larva can summon up to 5 Nightwalkers a day in order to aid him in combat, and if you're familiar with Mordenkainen and Tome of Foes, you would know that each Nightwalker is a CR 20 monster, and this guy can easily summon up to 5. Umbral Blot, CR 32 medium construct. The Umbral Blot is a sphere of absolute void that looks exactly like an overgrown sphere of annihilation, except that this void of destruction has sentience, high intelligence, and has an appetite for destruction. Many times over, it'll actually attempt to fool a wizard to believe that it can control it like it would a sphere of annihilation, only to wait for the right time to betray the wizard and completely consume it. This sphere attacks by merely touching that which it seeks to destroy. Anything it touches is taken into the orb and completely disintegrating it, leaving no remains. The Umbral Blot may also powerfully attempt to suck in all of the air in a room in order to either suck in enemies that are far away, or in an attempt to asphyxiate humanoids before disintegrating them. It is believed that these orbs of darkness were created by the Old Ones as assassins or messengers, but those Old Ones were probably murdered by the same very orbs. Iron Colossus, CR 33 Colossal Construct. This creature is essentially an iron golem, except that its body is sculpted from 150,000 pounds of pure iron. The Colossus is at least 80 feet tall and weighs around 350,000 pounds. An Iron Colossus costs about 1,000,000 gold pieces to create and can only be made by a level 35 spellcaster or higher. The creature is described as basically being able to instantly kill anything it punches or strikes, just because of its sheer size and power. But what makes this monster truly phenomenal and worthy of its challenge rating is the fact that the Iron Colossus is built in with an aura of anti-magic. Quote, "A Colossus constantly generates an anti-magic field in a 100-foot radius. The field is an invisible barrier that is impervious to most magical effects, including spells, spell-like abilities, and supernatural abilities. Likewise, it prevents the functioning of any magic items or spells within its confines, except for the Colossus's own supernatural abilities." End quote. The aura is there mostly as an offensive measure rather than a defensive one, since the Iron Colossus is by itself immune to all magical and supernatural effects. Vonindod from Storm King's Thunder might have actually been an Iron Colossus, but made out of adamantine. Both are titanic constructs of 80 feet in height. Faithon, CR 34 Gargantuan Elemental. The Faithons are the progeny of fire gods and reside typically deep within the magma cores of planets. They are enormous blots of sentient magma personified in a monstrous creature. Quote, Many worlds contain Faithons locked away at their heart, unable to break the compulsion laid on them by higher powers. The heat at the core of some worlds is sometimes altogether due to a supernatural Faithon or brood of Faithons, trapped and raging for eons. Sometimes a Faithon breaks its eternal Gias for a day or a season, during which time it incinerates anything it can flow over and smother. End quote. They attack by creating pseudopods of magma from their bodies and smashing others with it, or when possible, they simply absorb enemies into their bodies by simply moving onto them. If absorbed by one of these creatures, you take the same amount of damage as lava deals, which in D&D 5th edition is about 20d6 points of damage, plus half of that every turn you stay inside. Primal Elementals, CR 35 Colossal Elementals. This is the epitome of what an elemental could ever achieve if given enough power or enough time. So for example, hypothetically speaking, if the elemental princes were to succeed in their quest in the adventure Princes of the Apocalypse, this might actually be the end result of a single elemental primordial taking dominion over the land, taking in hundreds of thousands of cultists who would bless them with their faith and absorbing as much magic as they could. For example, if Imix, the eternal flame and the all-consuming fire, the prince of evil fire, were to burn all of the forests of the north, conflagrate all the houses and fields, and then consume hundreds of thousands of humans, he might be able to attach all of those flames onto himself, making an even bigger fire elemental. The reach of what could be achieved from doing that would be a CR 31 Primal Fire Elemental. Sixikal, CR 36. A Sixikal is born from a god whose portfolio includes evil, eyes, and chaos. These walking glaciers stand 100 feet or more high. Its hoary, ice-like body is vaguely humanoid but always shrouded in an ice storm that screams and howls around it. The ice storm is called Dire Winter, and it is a deadly, permanent blizzard that spans 1,000 feet around the monster, dealing 2d6 cold damage every single round to anyone inside of the radius unless otherwise protected. Everything freezes within the radius that is either a non-creature or that dies by the cold blizzard. Quote, pale dragons of purest white wing through the storm, alighting on the shoulders of the Colossus with impunity. Those that can withstand the punishment of the storm are subject to a Sixikal's fearsome claws, bite, stomp, and rend ability. Not to mention the one or more old white dragons that usually accompany a Sixikal wherever it goes, glorying in the frigid calamity of its presence. End quote. In combat, the Sixikal can summon up to 5 old white dragons. All of its attacks produce a slow effect on the receiver, like the slow 3rd level spell, and the receiver also loses 4 points of constitution permanently whenever hit. Whenever constitution score is drained in this way by an attack of the Sixikal heals for 20 points of damage. Any excess becomes temporary hit points. Just completely broken. Devastation Vermin, range from CR 39 to CR 50. The Devastation Vermin are a collection of 4 creatures that are basically like the Tarask, except that they have stronger stats but less complexity. There is the Devastation Centipede with a CR of 39, the Devastation Spider with a CR of 41, the Devastation Scorpion with a CR of 42, and the Devastation Beetle with a CR of 50. There really isn't much to these creatures other than their basic stats, and we only really get an official picture of the Devastation Beetle, the stronger of them all. There also isn't really any lore for them. All we're told is, quote, Devastation Vermin are mindless agents of destruction, time-forgotten remnants of an alternate multiverse that comes into sync with our own only once every few thousand eons. Devastation Vermin are creatures that have slumbered beneath the surface of the earth for untold centuries, hidden away and undisturbed. Often Devastation Vermin are awakened by the encroachment of civilization into their nests, or the area above them. When disturbed, Devastation Vermin erupt from the soil with ravenous appetites, leaving swaths of destruction in their paths as they feed." End quote. And that's all we get. It's very unlikely that these monsters are in the Forgotten Realms, so it is very unlikely that you will ever see them in any of the adventures or in any of the novels or in any of the video games. But there you have it. We have a challenge rating for each of them and we have character stats, so enjoy. And now, finally, we are at the end of things. I have here access to 2 more monsters, one with a CR of 56 and another one with a CR of 57. Actually insane. I do want to say though, it's not just possible but likely that I have missed some monsters out there. Obviously, I'm not perfect. Dungeons & Dragons has been out for a long time and there are many books out there, but as far as monsters with challenge ratings go, these 2 are the highest that I have seen. Now, this challenge rating range appears to be from what is written in these monsters to be roughly where gods actually are. If I had to guess, I would actually say a relatively powerful generic god would probably find itself roughly around the range of a CR 50. Though it is also important to mention that many gods would probably be far lower than this, since well, challenge rating is a measure of how difficult a monster is to fight, not necessarily a measure of the general power of that entity. I'm saying this because a god of fertility is obviously not going to be a great fighter, so if it had a challenge rating it would probably not be too high, in spite of the fact that its actual ability as a god of fertility in other things like fertility would be far greater than most others. Now, the 2 monsters that we are about to talk about are god killers, entities that not just kill gods, but kill them rather easily. As in a one-on-one fight between these monsters that I'm about to present and any god, the monsters would actually win handily, like it wouldn't even be close. In many cases, it appears these monsters are actually so powerful that they can actually defeat multiple gods at the same time. Cronus. CR 56 Gargantuan Titan. Cronus was the titan that sparked the battle between the gods and the titans, their first creation. It was this very same battle that taught the gods that they should never ever create anything that would rival them in power ever again, and that's why they went on to create weak mortals from then on, like the humans and the elves. The battle started when Cronus castrated and killed his own father, Uranus, a god of the sun. This ignited the Titans' revolt, and Cronus led the war for many centuries. The lore states that Cronus failed more than 100 gods in personal combat. It says that he basked in the fiery rays of Pelor's hottest flames, mocked Ovadhai's mightiest blast of tree-rending wind, and fought 5,000 passes with Heronias and Hexter. These are all gods from the world where Saltmarsh is said, from the world of Greyhawk. The only reason that Cronus was ever stopped from his rampage was by putting a bunch of gods together using their strongest spells in unison. Quote, "Finally the deities bent their ear to Kurtulmak, the cunning kobold god of traps, who concocted one of the most brilliant snares ever conceived. The gods ambushed Cronus en force, while the dwarf gods drew his ire. Bokub, Garl, Glittergold, Olidimara, and Weejas wove their most powerful enchantments, melded flawlessly with potent illusions. For Langd leveled powerful translocation magic upon the Titan as well. Cronus was instantly transported to a powerful prison the gods prepared in Carceri. There, Cronus, his mind vexed and eternal form weakened by powerful spells and illusory effects, believes he still wages his war against the gods. For millennia he has battled in a dreamscape of the gods' collective design, and Zorseled for all time. Or so the gods hoped. They believed eventually the Titan would tire of his war, or better, be slain in phantom combat. Instead, Cronus has fought through the ages, brutally slaying the gods one by one in his phantasmal prison. The gods watch grimly as each of them fell to Cronus' glaive, and now their numbers dwindled. If the Titan slays every phantom god, the potent magic befuddling his mind might crumble. When it does, Cronus' rage at the god's trickery promises their doom. He will shrug off the mighty shackles of Corsari's greatest prison and regain his powers to menace the heavens. The gods have seen their doom in their own illusory trap, and they fear they might not be able to stand against Cronus. End quote. Hecaton Kairos, CR57, huge abomination. Quote, Hecaton Kairos are the oldest abominations, born of proto-deities early in the multiverse's history. At the beginning of time, all things were possible. The definition of form and function for living things was not yet set, and in that time were born the Hecaton Kairos, the 100-handed ones. The Hecaton Kairos are huge, standing over 30 feet tall, and like a living tree, bulging with knobby boles. They have 100 arms and 50 heads. Words fail to describe the monstrosity of their forms, or the brutality of their visage. They are always armed, grasping great swords or boulders in each of their hands. They wear magic half-plate armor. Sometimes a Hecaton Kairos is armed with one or more magic weapons as well. End quote. Because of how powerful they were and because of their grotesque visage, they were outcast and sealed away basically from the moment they were created. The lore, however, states that because of their insane power and martial ability, very often they would be released by gods in order to have them take down rival deities. It is said that each time they were released, and all pantheon fell. Quote, few creatures can stand up to the Hecaton Kairos in combat, not even the gods. End quote. The power of the creature is quite straightforward. It can attack up to 100 times with its greatswords as long as the creature it is fighting is at least size huge or bigger. It can only attack a small creature up to 10 times, a medium creature up to 15 times, and a large creature up to 20. What makes this guy so particularly ferocious as well is that it can actually summon another Hecaton Kairos as an action, but typically it is loath to do so since then it'll be similarly obligated to answer the call from another in the future. In Greek mythology, the Hecaton Kairos were born from Uranus and Gaia, but upon being born, Uranus realized that they were too powerful and so he essentially banished them. It's also interesting that according to Greek mythology, in the end when Zeus needed to kill Cronus, he actually used Hecaton Kairos for help. Ironically, or likely purposefully in D&D, the Hecaton Kairos appears to be the only entity strong enough to be able to challenge Cronus in here as well. So, there you have it. The strongest monsters in Dungeons & Dragons. Like I said before, we don't really have confirmation that these monsters exist within the Forgotten Realms world, but they do exist in D&D in general. So even though we might not see these monsters per se in our games, it does tell us that according to D&D, a CR of 56 and 57 is powerful enough to easily kill basically any god. And that tells us, more or less, the range that gods would probably have in their power, which I would imagine, like I said before, would be maybe in and around CR50. That's very interesting because from the sounds of it, it means that the strongest monster in the Forgotten Realms, Daurgothoth, is basically strong enough to be a god, or at least to kill a few of them, which is kinda cool. Oh, actually, yikes, there's 2 more monsters. Though, quite frankly, I was debating hard on whether I should even have these guys in. Much like the Devastation Vermin, these 2 dragons feel kinda just off, like they don't belong. Like they're just here for shock value or for godlike adventurers to fight, rather than an actual monster or monsters that exist in an ecosystem in a world. I'm talking about, of course, the Forest Dragons and the Prismatic Dragons, which I know that some of you have been mentioning on some of my older videos. These dragons are so powerful that their babies could basically destroy anything that you could find in most 5th edition adventures. A baby Forest Dragon is CR 13 and a baby Prismatic Dragon is CR 14, which is surreal. The adults? Well, a Great Worm Forest Dragon is CR 59, and a Great Worm Prismatic Dragon is CR 66. the highest CR that I've actually ever seen. Now, we have no actual confirmation that there exists a Great Worm version of any of these dragons in the multiverse or in any of the main D&D worlds, but if they existed, that's how powerful they could become if they reached that age category. Let's go ahead and quickly cover each of them. The size of the egg for a forest dragon is so huge that it is actually the size of a house, and the size of an adult forest dragon is so big that they actually needed to add a new classification for size into the game just to fit these guys in. Before, we had small, medium, large, giant, and gargantuan. Gargantuan being just the highest that you could be, and anything above giant would just fall into that category. In 3rd edition, we had another one called Colossal, but just for this monster, they added Colossal Plus. A baby forest dragon emerges covered in glittering scales like tiny diamonds all around its body, and as the creature grows older, it starts learning to refract light, and its skin continues to evolve in order for it to do so. By the time that they reach adulthood, they are surrounded by giant orbs of light that shimmer into a haze of colors and light, and by the time they reach their final stage of Great Worm, they are simply just naturally invisible, with light literally passing through them. Their breath weapon is a massive cone of force that tears through creatures and objects in its area to devastating effects. They are immune to force damage, obviously, and they completely evade and pass through any type of force effect, like the walls of force. Because of their ability to refract light, they also have a permanent blur effect on them, like the spell, making them extremely difficult to detect and strike. They appear to be able to get food from force energies in the air and from magic itself. Now, for the prismatic dragons, the same applies to their size. Their babies are enormous and their adults are incomprehensibly big. In many ways, they actually behave like gold dragons. That means that prismatic dragons are actually fairly benevolent, very responsible with their surroundings, and can actually be very friendly and conversational. They enjoy life and the diversity that the different races of the different worlds provide. Their scales are super tiny and reflective, to the point where it looks like their skin is just multicolored light, and the smoothness of their skin appears to be like that of a snake, just because of how tiny their scales actually are. The prismatic light around them protects them like a shield, granting them resistance to many spells, and those that strike them through the light often become confused and befuddled. This also makes them immune to blindness and any form of light spell or prismatic effect. They very rarely fight and instead prefer to converse in order to absorb and learn of the quirks of people and creatures because it amuses them. And their breath weapon is a powerful prismatic spray effect. It's very difficult to see where these dragons would factor in when it comes to the balance of power in the multiverse, just based on what we already know and what we just talked about when it comes to gods and of course the power of Cronus. We just talked about how Cronus could have easily just destroyed all the gods in the multiverse, and now we're told of a dragon that just blows him out of the water. But hey, it is what it is. I'm just the messenger. I don't know much about these prismatic dragons or forest dragons because there really isn't anything else to learn about them. There is no lore, there is no further information. The place where they are supposed to exist, the heaven called Dragon Eyrie, was destroyed in the Spell Plague, so were they destroyed as well? Do they exist anymore? We just have no idea. But that's it. That's gonna wrap up this entire series. I hope this has helped shed some perspective into what power really is in D&D and what level an adventurer actually takes in the hierarchy of the world. I would like to personally thank my Patreon supporters Walker Motley, Zach Bowell, Rukato Fan, Barry Maskant, 5E Magic Shop, Daniel Umar, Dr. Cowbell, Rusty Rain, Morgan Johnson, Biotechnofrag, Daniel Luna, Doc Feeder, Brad Salazar, The Great Codini, Terry Culp, G-Herc, Red Soul Knight, Baracus Law, Omega Scales, Karathis the Bulwark, and Oswald for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching the series. That was a hoot, covering all the monsters that were above CR30. A lot of research, a lot of looking around, but I feel like we made it happen. Hopefully I didn't miss any. If I did, then I might actually just kind of combine all these videos into one hour-long video and then probably just update it from there if I need to. But anyways guys, for the second time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.